Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you've ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. Since 2009, our radio program hosted guest experts from around the globe sharing their perspectives, experiences, and expertise while giving you food for thought. If you can't listen live, then download and listen to any of our 300-plus podcasts in our library at texasconflictcoach.com. So sit back, relax, or join the conversation every Tuesday evening, or tweet us at TXConflictCoach.
Every school year, kids skip class and have unexcused absences. Nothing new there. In fact, it is a very common issue impacting families, schools, and their communities, and can become a very serious problem, landing the family and their child in court. We are going to talk about truancy mediation, what you should know in our Back to School series. Now, you will learn about truancy and how mediation can be a valuable process for students, parents, and schools. And you're going to hear about typical cases referred to juvenile truancy mediation programs and some of the possible outcomes. Now, joining me tonight is Michelle Zaremba and Trisha Werts from Dayton Mediation Center in Ohio. They will discuss the benefits of truancy mediation as well as some strategies and tips to prevent truancy. Now, the two guests that we have here, Michelle Zaremba is the director of Dayton Mediation Center, and she's worked in the field for 14 years. She holds a BA in Applied Conflict Management and a Master of Public Administration. Michelle is a Certified Transformative Mediator, and we'll talk about what a transformative mediator is a little bit later in the show. Now, Trisha Werts, our second guest, is the Mediation Specialist for Juvenile Court Mediation Programs at Dayton Mediation Center, and she's worked in the field for 12 years and is also a Certified Transformative Mediator. Trisha specializes in training, mediating, and youth programming. Now, we are not taking live callers. However, we have lots of ways for you to engage with us. We have the chat room open, and if you'd like to post your comments and questions there, simply go to blogtalkradio.com/Texas-conflict-coach. You'll scroll down. You'll see the shows going live. You can hear and post comments and questions there in the chat room. But we also have a live Twitter feed going on tonight, and so just search for the hashtag T like in Texas, CC, which is Conflict Coach, Radio, TCC Radio. Remember, use that hashtag, and we have someone who's running the feed there, so you can certainly leave your comments and questions there as well, and we'll bring them into the conversation. So, Michelle and Trisha, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you for having us.
Oh,
yes,
absolutely.
Great to be here.
Thank you. This is fun. We've been planning for this, and this is something we've not talked about. You know, over the course of 4.5 years on the Texas Conflict Coach, we've done a number of things on Back to School series, but you know, truancy is a big issue, and certainly truancy mediation is something very new, and a lot of people probably don't know about what it is. So, but before we launch right into that, Michelle, can you share with listeners about the mission and the work of the Dayton Mediation Center there in Ohio?
Sure. We are a community mediation center, and we're part of the city of Dayton. We've been around for 26 years, and we're a pretty active center. We have roughly 10 staff and contractors that help manage all of our different programming. We have about 18 different conflict management programs, and we receive roughly 1,600 referrals per year, and we mediate about 800 of those cases. We are a transformative mediation center. And since we're a community mediation center, we gather volunteers from the community to help us mediate our cases. So our volunteers go through a rigorous 6 to 9 month training program, so they're highly skilled, and they commit 2 years to us. Most stay longer than that because it's a great program, and we're fortunate to have community members so active in our center. We have about 100 active volunteers that help us out with our programming. And as we're going to talk about today, truancy is one of our programs that we have with our juvenile court, and it began in 1999.
1999. Okay, well, that's a long time. You have a lot of longevity there with that program. So, Trisha, you're, one of the ones who leads the Juvenile Mediation and Truancy program and do a lot of youth programming. So, say more about what the primary purpose of this particular program is for your Community Mediation Center.
Really the purpose of the program is to give the family a chance to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody from the school about what's happening with the child and why they are missing school. Because many times, there is no direct communication. Parents are calling in and leaving messages, or there's notes being, sent back and forth, and so that face-to-face conversation usually doesn't happen before this stage, and so that's really what our Truancy Mediation program is about. And so many times the problem really isn't that the kid's just skipping school. Sometimes, there's lots of other issues that are involved, and it's really about helping the school and the family communicate with each other so that they can figure out how to address the situation.
Well, it's interesting that you say, it gives an opportunity for families to have that face-to-face, but, someone might be listening to this and say, well, what stops them from just picking up the phone or going to the school and say, hey, I need to talk to you? I mean, how is that different, by doing the mediation, that face-to-face? I mean, why don't parents already have that face-to-face going on in the first place?
Well, there's lots of issues. I mean, sometimes they do pick up the phone, and like I said, sometimes you have to, depending on who you're trying to talk to, if it's a teacher or something, you have to leave a message, and it can be hard to actually get them on the phone to have a conversation. And I think the other piece of it is some of our families, their phones, aren't always reliable. They, either get shut off because of financial issues or things like that, and so the communication just breaks down from there for many of our families. And so it can be difficult for them to actually do that. Plus, if they just show up at the school, schools are very busy places, and, people can't just drop everything and be like, oh, let me have this conversation with you for the next 15 minutes and let's get it worked out. And that isn't always feasible. So I think that all of those things come into play.
Well, we're going to line. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say another reason parents may not call the school to find out what's going on is sometimes the parents don't even know that the child is missing school. And so that the child, maybe the parents go to work first and then the child goes to school, and the parents are unaware that they're missing school, and so the kids are taking the notes out of the mail and they're leaving phone calls, so parents may not know.
Okay. And I know there's a number of issues we're going to talk about that arise, in these typical cases that you deal with. Let's just define truancy, because some people might not even know what that word is. Can we define it and then talk a little bit about why is this such a big deal? I mean, we take it for granted, like you said, kids miss school, but how is this impacting schools, students, and their families?
Sure. Well, looking it up, I think each state has a different definition, but for Ohio law, they define truancy as an absence from school without permission. And so, that's the kind of basic definition, and then it kind of goes into number of days and that kind of thing. But it definitely impacts schools in many ways. A big way is financially, because when students miss days, a lot of funding is based on percentages of attendance, and so that comes into play, and so funding then gets called into question if there's too much, if there's too many absences for any given school during a year. So that becomes a huge issue. There's also the impact in the classroom, because if kids are missing a lot of class time, then the teachers may have to be backtracking as far as what they're teaching to get everybody on the same page, and so it's taking valuable time from the students that are there if the teachers happen to go back and try to help people at least have a basic understanding of where they're at, because the kids miss a lot of school. As far as the students, I mean, obviously it's impacting their education, which can impact their future. But it also impacts families because, if a kid's missing, then steps get taken, such as, court or meetings or things like that the parents have to go to. And so then they're missing work to show up at the school to have meetings about what's going on with the child's attendance. So it all kind of feeds off of each other.
So let me just clarify a couple things that you said. First of all, when you talked about different states having different definitions, are these legal definitions set by the state?
Yes, they're definitely legal definitions, and truancy is considered a status offense, which is only a charge that somebody under 18 faces. So like running away, not skipping school, being out after curfew, those are things that only kids can be charged with. So each state has their own definition, their legal definition of what they consider truancy.
Okay, I really appreciate that because I really think there's a lot of family, students who don't understand the significance of how important this topic is. And so not only is there this legal definition, but like you said, there's a status offense. So, you know, we talked about all the various impacts, especially like, you know, something new for some people that's listening to the show is the financial funding that it's based on, you know, kids being present. Some people might not know that. But also that you said there are legal steps that are taken. And so maybe you could walk through an example of a typical case referred by the court or the school because if it is a status offense, the court's getting involved. And I don't think people understand sometimes the importance of where that legal piece comes in. So could you walk us through a typical example of that and how it gets to you?
Sure. Basically what happens is once the child hits a certain number of days, and like in Ohio law it varies, it could be if they miss so many days in 1 month or so many days over the course of the year, that can vary. But, you know, then the school is required to send that information to the juvenile court, and then the juvenile court has to do something with it. And the way our program works is if it's a child's first-time offense with this issue, then the juvenile court refers the case to mediation, and we set up a mediation with the school and the family. And as far as what happens after that, if they're able to come to mediation and have a conversation and figure out ways to do things differently so the child isn't missing any more school, as long as that agreement gets followed through with, then they do not have an official juvenile court record. It stays an unofficial case, and nothing else further is done.
All right. So let's just clarify. So the status offense has met the number of requirements, meaning the child in whatever state, because we have people who listen from all over the world, but in our particular state, United States, they miss so many sessions, whatever the state's requirement is. It goes to juvenile court, and if it's a first offense, it goes to you as a mediation. So let's talk a little bit about the mediation. We've talked to the listeners about mediation a number of times, and we're going to talk a little bit about the transformative approach, but this is the opportunity you were talking about earlier that gives families face-to-face. So who's actually in the mediation then?
Usually there's some kind of representative from the school, and that can vary depending on the schools. Many times it can be principals, sometimes guidance counselors. Sometimes the school districts have what they call truancy officers, or a person that's kind of in charge of their attendance issues and things like that. And so it can vary from school to school. And then, of course, the parent and the child.
So the child is also in the mediation?
Yes.
Now, is this any age group that you're dealing with in the mediation?
The kids typically that we meet with are above the age of 10, so they're in 6th grade and above, and so those are the kids that are usually in the mediations. The younger kids, in the past when we've done truancy for the younger ages, it's typically just the parents in the mediation. But at a certain age, they feel that the school and the court feel that the children are playing a part in their truancy, and so when they're young, under 5th grade, then most of the time it's parents.
It's directly related to what the parents' involvement is in the mediation then. All right, so let me just clarify. So here we are. We have a case that's been given to the Dayton Mediation Ohio Center, or the Dayton Mediation Center in Ohio, excuse me. And we have parents in there, maybe even both parents. We have the child in there, especially if they're above the age of 10, and we have a school representative. So what do you find in doing these cases are the kinds of issues that arise in these conversations that say it's not just about the child missing school, there's something that's behind them missing? Can you give us a couple of examples of the kind of issues?
Sure. One of the ones we had this past school year was a Latino family, actually, at one of our schools, and the mom and the child was there. And then we knew ahead of time there was a language issue, and so they had asked for an interpreter, and they were there present along with I believe it was the principal in this case. And as the conversation began, mom did not really understand much English, and so. The biggest issue was mom didn't understand what she was supposed to do if the child was out sick, that she didn't know she could call into the school and let them know, or that she needed to send a note when they came back. And so there was a lot of conversation about that piece of it, just helping her understand kind of the process of that needs to happen when the child misses school if they're ill or something. And then there was also this other issue about that many times that the bus was not showing up to pick up the child. It wasn't stopping at that bus stop. And the mom couldn't call transportation because obviously she couldn't speak English. And so it was a way for the school to, figure out that was the problem and then try to help her get that resolved so that to make sure that the bus was stopping there for the child every morning.
Okay. And are there often family issues that are involved here?
Sure, there's definitely family issues. Sometimes it's miscommunication between parents if mom and dad don't live in the same household, and maybe one of the parents values school and the other parent doesn't, or maybe there's some barriers for one parent to get the child to school. Those are some of the issues that come up. Again, parent and child maybe not on the same page as far as understanding the value of school. So there's definitely a lot of times that during the mediation that the parent and child can work out some of the issues that are coming up with regards to truancy.
Okay, so sometimes it could be these misunderstandings or conflict, especially around values, around the value of school and attending school that can come up. And so it's not that you stop the conversation, you actually encourage that type of conversation in the mediation as well.
Definitely.
Okay. So before we go on, I just want to let listeners know, if you're just now tuning in, that you are listening to the Texas Conflict Coach Blog Talk Radio program, and I am speaking with Michelle Zaremba and Trisha Werts with the Dayton, Ohio Mediation Center, and one of the many successful programs they run is the Juvenile Mediation and Truancy program. So we've been talking a little bit in our Back to School series about the significance of truancy, especially that is considered a status offense in many states. They all have different definitions, and how how important it is for families and the school representative and the child to sit down together to talk about what is some of the root reasons, causes for for the child to be truant. And a lot of times I'm understanding from Trisha and Michelle is it could be misunderstanding, lack of communication because of a language barrier, something that's going on between the child and the parent that's causing them to skip school. Are there any other issues that's worthy of highlight? I know there's a lot of them, but is there anything else that you wanted to noteworthy that you wanted to mention now about that?
Well, definitely we've heard in some mediations that kids maybe are getting picked on at school, or they're having an issue with a teacher and they're too embarrassed to talk to their parents about it, or they don't want to talk about it. And so a way of avoiding it is to just not go to school. And so there's been occasions where kids will open up in mediation and talk about what's really happening and the stress that they're under because they're being picked on, or they just feel like there's an issue with the teacher, and those type of issues can come out and addressed because somebody from the school is there and the parents there, and they all can work together on figuring out what to do about that situation.
Okay. Now the purpose of mediation obviously is to sit down face-to-face to work through those issues. What is the ultimate goal? They're coming to a close in the conversation, and the agreements typically look like what?
They can vary widely depending on the situation. Sometimes it's, the steps. Like for the Latino family, I think theirs looks something like, that mom is now going to make sure that she calls in if the child is out sick. If the child goes to the doctor, she's going to send in a doctor's note when the child returns. But then there was also the issue that the school was going to make a call to transportation to try to get the bus situation fixed since mom wasn't able to talk with them herself. So that was one. Many times, if there's issues with the child, getting up in the morning and getting ready for school, sometimes there's the agreement will look like the plan. Okay, their alarm's going to go off at this time, and mom's going to come in and check that they're up, and they're going to get ready and they're going to make it to the bus, and just some of the logistical things sometimes are issues that the parent and child haven't agreed on, and so they've decided what it was going to be in mediation, and we've written that up so that they both are clear about kind of the steps that need to happen for that kid to get on the bus and get to school on time.
Okay, so it can be a really big range, it sounds like.
And I think one thing it's not a chance for the child to negotiate how many days of school they're going to miss. In the beginning of our program, our truancy officers were concerned about that. They said this isn't an option, this is the law. And so there was a lot of education on our part to explain that, we're not going to sit down with the kid and say, okay, you can come to school 3 days a week, but the other 2 you don't have to come. But it's addressing the issues as Trisha and I have brought up so that those can get resolved so the child can go to school.
Okay, I'm so glad you said that, and I laugh because, the child's probably going in there. It's like, all right, I don't have to go to school on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Now, do you find that as the child gets older, more into the upper teenage level, 16, 17, even 18, do you find that the issues are more complex or more difficult than the younger kids?
I mean, I think certainly they can be more challenging because at that age sometimes they are skipping. I mean, they're just choosing not to go, and, if mom goes to work before they leave, they just don't go. They don't get on the bus or they don't walk or whatever, and they just don't go. And so some of that can then, becomes more of that conversation between mom and child about, whether education is important and the parent really saying, this is, one, it's the law, but two, I want you to have an education. And then a lot of times, conversations about their future can take place and, questions can get asked about, what do you want to do when school's out? And, do you think that you're going to be able to keep a job if you can't make it to school every day? I mean, and helping them think through what the choices they're making now, how that could impact their future. But I think that definitely is more challenging.
Okay, very good. Now, the last question I have about the mediation itself, and we'll talk a little bit more about the transformative framework that you're using, and that is you said the mediation is often given to the first offense. So what if it happens you come to an agreement, I'm sure it's monitored, maybe you'll say a little bit who monitors that, but let's say there's a second and a third offense. What happens then? Are they back in mediation, or what happens at that point?
Well, at that point, go ahead, Trish.
Oh, okay. At that point, no, it does not come back to mediation. The court then looks at the case again and decides what the next steps needs to be, and they have a range of things that they can do at the court level. So it gets elevated then.
Yes, and I think we should point out that the mediation process is a diversion program, so this doesn't show up on any of the kids' records at this point. And so once they start continuing to be habitually truant, then that escalates, and it eventually shows up on their record, and that could prevent them from getting scholarships, joining the military. There's just lots of things that happen when you get a record in juvenile court.
Okay, so essentially it's a one-shot opportunity for that mediation that first time, and then after that it's really in the courts, in their basically the court's in the court. It's in their bailiwick to deal with however they're going to move forward with that. Okay, so thanks for clarifying that. So let's talk then a little bit about why, I think we've already implied a number of benefits in just having these face-to-face conversations. You've mentioned a number of times the transformative mediation approach. Not everyone's going to really understand that. So how could we explain that in a simple way, why that's important for them to know?
Well, our process is different than other problem-solving approaches, and what we're really focusing on as mediators is helping people communicate with one another. So we're trying to help their interaction change from maybe negative and destructive to more positive and constructive. And so we have a unique opportunity to help create a space for people to have meaningful dialogue about whatever they need to talk about to address their concerns and their issues. So it opens a space for kids and parents and school officials to talk and they get to say what they need to say, hear what the other has to say, and our role is really to support that and to help people, get clear about what they want to talk about and what the issues are, and make decisions about what they want to do about those situations.
Okay. All right. Great. So I appreciate you doing that. So it's really about, providing that. I'm a transformative mediator as well, and so it's really giving the parties, the child, the parent, and the school an opportunity to talk in a way that's not, that you're not directing them down a certain path or telling them or suggesting certain solutions that they have. That really you're giving a huge framework for them to talk openly about anything that comes up in that mediation conversation.
Definitely.
So, Trisha, since you do a lot of the juvenile programming, talk a little bit about, there might be other states that, in each, depending on where you are, listener, in the United States, and who knows, there could be something in Canada and other countries, but does it have to go through the juvenile court system, or can schools set up a program themselves, as far as developing a truancy mediation program? So maybe a school's listening to this and they're like, we don't have anything like that. So say more about the programming piece and setting up a program.
I think certainly schools could do that because really we have seen that the earlier the intervention as far as mediation, the better the outcome usually. So if you catch a kid when they've only missed, 7 to 10 days or 10 to 15 days, there's a much better chance that, having that conversation and that early on will change what happens for the rest of the year. So I think schools could certainly set up a program and obviously there's issues about funding and things like that, but I think that there would be, half of the cases of truancy could be dealt with at that level before they even have to make a referral to court.
Now, is the typical truancy mediation program, and I know you could speak to yours, and maybe you can even speak to other programs that's going on in the United States, is it generally through a community mediation program, or do schools themselves set up the mediation program at the school that they monitor, organize, et cetera?
I would say typically it's a community mediation center, or sometimes the court will hire a mediator that will do the truancy program. So I think it's hard for schools since they use other types of interventions to try to address the truancy issues. So it's not like they're ignoring it until it gets sent to court. They're actively trying steps. So we offer a different type of process that they can try to help, figure out what's going on so kids get back in school.
Okay. Well, and I imagine that early intervention is really key here, not to, for it to get to a habitual place for kids that this offers that alternative. So it sounds like if a listener's listening and they're in the state of Kentucky, for example, and they're like, I wonder if there's a program like that, they could either check the juvenile court to see if there's a program, or they can check their local community mediation center, it sounds like. Or is there a central location where parents or schools can go to say what's available in my state? Is there a central location?
Well, if they want to find out if there's a community mediation center close in their neighborhood.
So, Trisha, why don't you pick up where Michelle left off?
I'm assuming she was going to talk about that there's some websites you could go to find your local community mediation center if you have one in your area, and then you could follow up with them by giving them a call and seeing if they do any kind of truancy mediation, and then kind of start the conversation about how whether that's possible to have at your school.
And I think one of those websites is the National Association for Community Mediation. Is that one of the websites you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so listeners, that's www.n like in national, A, F like in Frank, C, M like in Mary.org, National Association for Community Mediation. That's just one of the websites. And we'll give more resources a little bit later. Michelle, was there anything else that you wanted to add about that?
No, I think that the NAFCM website is very user-friendly and helpful, and their email contact information for your state. And if you're interested in setting up a community mediation center, they're available to help you do that. So maybe a group of parents want to start something in the school. The schools certainly are open to any type of intervention that will help kids stay in school. So they're definitely a great resource.
Okay, and we'll come back to more resources. Let's talk about the last thing, which I think is really important, which is, in order to keep these lines of communication open between the school, this is that early intervention piece, and we want to keep this line of communication open between the school, the students, and their families because it impacts all of them. What are some strategies or tips that you could recommend to help change these truant behaviors or to prevent them?
We have probably 4 main tips. First of all, parents should take the time to read the child's school policy on attendance because many times the parents just aren't aware of, whether they're supposed to call in or maybe they're supposed to call in and send a note. So every school's policy is a little different. So just take the time at the beginning of the school year and read that policy so that you're aware of your responsibility as the parent.
Okay.
That would be number 1. Number 2 would be to always get a note from the doctor or the dentist when you take the child, especially during school hours, so that that's going to be considered an excused absence and you won't have to be concerned about that one.
Okay.
Number 3 would be if there are issues with things like transportation, the bus, or things like that, that you communicate and start with the teacher and kind of work your way up because some things the teacher might not be able, they might say, okay, well, if it's a bus issue, you need to call transportation. So you have to kind of go through the chain of command at the school so that everybody can be aware and help you figure out what you need to do to fix the situation.
So just clarify something because that's the first time I've heard it used in terms of a chain of command in school. So that would be what? Teacher first?
Yeah,
and is that like a homeroom teacher or the teacher for the missed class?
It depends on the age of the child. Obviously, in high school, it's a little different because, if they're changing classes every period. So depending on the issue, you may not even start with the teacher. You may start with the either counselor or principal if it's a transportation issue. So it kind of depends on the age of the student.
Okay, so let's just go through an example. So it would be teacher, and then what? Who would be next?
Typically either the counselor or the principal, depending on some schools don't always have full-time counselors. So I would say, the next best bet would be the counselor, and then if they don't have one, the principal.
Okay. So and then is there a third step, or is that the principal the highest?
Obviously, unless it's a huge issue that you would want to go to like the superintendent or something, but typically principal would be it.
Okay, or even the assistant principal if the principal wasn't available?
Yeah, definitely. It depends on the size of the school because sometimes you have certain like vice principals for certain grades and things like that if it's a larger school. So, yeah, you have to at least educate yourself about your school a little bit so you know kind of who deals with the type of issues that you're having.
So I think that's, and so in that third strategy is, when you were talking about talk to the teacher first and then kind of go through the chain of command, is really knowing who's the teacher's name, the counselor's name, the principal's name, what's their phone number so that they know exactly at the beginning of the year who is their primary contact. So you said there was a fourth strategy.
Yes, the fourth one is to keep track of the days your child misses or is late. Just, occasionally we have issues where the school, has made a mistake. The teacher's counting the wrong kid absent, by accident or something like that. And so it's just good for you as the parent to be aware of how many days your child has missed in case there's any mix-ups.
Okay, very good. So some 4 simple strategies that would really prevent misunderstandings or really being on top of what's going on for your children and checking in with the school, especially for those parents who are even unaware or, like you said earlier, Michelle and Trisha, not even knowing. They think their child's in school, but they don't even know. So how do they take a more proactive role, and kind of checking in on their children regarding that. So, okay, anything else on strategies and tips? Otherwise, we're going to start to close up with a call to action. So anything more that you wanted to say about the strategies or tips?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, great. Well, as we are starting to close down the program for tonight, and I thank you so much. This is really valuable information. We usually do an assignment for the week or a call to action so that as listeners hang up from the program, they're like, okay, that's the first step I'm going to take. What would you suggest for them to do next?
I would say our call to action is really to ask parents to sit down with their kids and talk about the importance of going to school and being on time. I think that's another thing that we should touch on is that a lot of schools and a lot of their policies, if you're just late to school, that adds up to an absence, and that can trigger the referral to the court. So really talk to your kids about the importance of going and being on time. And talk to them about the benefits of education. What is the value of, learning, and what types of things do you get because you have an education, and what can you do with your life because of that? And I would say the last one is to really open the lines of communication with your kids to talk about any issues or concerns they may be having with the school, with students, and begin the conversation now so that when an issue does come up, your child is able to approach you and talk to you about what's going on.
So it's almost like, school's going to start in, 2 or 3 weeks for some schools, and so not too far along the road here. So now is the time, parents and teachers, but especially parents, to be sitting down. And I like the idea of, even starting, we had a guest last week called Talking Jars, and they have questions in these like mason jars, and they said start these conversations now. So one of those questions could be, parents, is what concerns do you have asking the child what concerns you the most, or what are you feeling challenged most about going to school this year, and just starting that conversation and being able to talk about the importance, like you said, of the timely attendance, not just the unexcused absence, like missing a whole. So one of the things I'm picking up, it's not just you're missing the whole day of school. It could be this tardiness issue that could really count toward this. So it's really the whole attendance, timeliness, attendance, missing one class versus missing the whole day. You have to look at the whole picture, not just, they missed a whole day of school. You're talking about all of these elements here.
Sure. And
Go ahead.
What a lot of the school officials talk to the kids about when they're talking about being on time is that you're learning behaviors that you're going to take with you for the rest of your life. So if you start thinking it's okay to be late in school, then when you get a job, you think it's okay to be late at your job, and it's just a bad habit to get into. So again, it's learning early the importance of showing up to somewhere on time.
Yeah, that's a great transferable skill, as they get into adulthood and things of that nature. Now, we talked about other resources here. We talked about the National Association for Community Mediation.org, so NAFCM.org, where if they wanted to see if there was a community mediation program in their state or local area, to see if they have a juvenile mediation program. But you have 2 other websites. Please share that with our listeners.
Well, the first one, or I guess the second one now, is the Dayton Mediation Center's website. We have a lot of information about our different programming and just helpful information about mediation, community mediation, and transformative mediation. And our website is DaytonMediationCenter.org.
Okay, and that's DAYTON, mediationcenter.org. And then the second, or the third side is if people want to know more about the framework of transformative mediation, you can go to www.transformativemediation.org. So those would be the 3 websites. Michelle and Trisha, you've offered our listeners a great deal of value, raising their understanding and awareness about what truancy is, and giving them some important strategies and tips, and understanding the benefit of their children needing to be in school, because sometimes the parents, maybe they don't see the benefit either, and so this is very, very helpful. As we close, what final message do you want to leave with our listeners?
Truancy mediation, or mediation in general, is a unique opportunity to have that meaningful conversation, and schools are very fast-paced, just the nature of the school day, and it's difficult to find time to have these conversations. So, it's an opportunity to say what you need to say and hear what the others have to say and make decisions about how you want to address the issues. So we really encourage people to, try to meet ahead of time. If there's an issue, meet fast early in the conflict or, the truancy issue. And then if it gets to a point where you feel like you need somebody else to come in and help with that conversation, then definitely contact your community mediation center to have those conversations with your school.
Okay, that's wonderful. Any other final message? Okay. So I want to say thank you so much for your valuable time tonight in educating our audience and letting them know so much about this. And I'm sure there would be much more to talk about, but I'm glad that we at least gave them a chance to peek through the window or through the door about what this is and the importance of it. So thank you so much, Michelle and Trisha, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're very welcome. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you've enjoyed the program. You can find over 300 podcasts archived to listen at your own convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. To learn about upcoming radio programs and resources, sign up for our monthly e-newsletter.